Hey everyone, just wanted to give you a quick heads up. The second Global Product Owner Summit is coming soon. You can get all the details at bit.ly/Product Owner 2024. That's bit.ly/Product Owner 2024. And it's all lowercase, all one word. Oh, and stick with us until the end of the episode to know the dates and the tracks that we have for you in this year's summit. But for now, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special bonus episode. And for today's bonus episode, we're going to talk about Agile coaches and maybe a new term for some of you, product coaches. And we have with us our guest, Phillip Starke. Hey, Phillip, welcome to the show.
Hi, Vasco. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So Phillip is a Scrum Master, Agile coach, and product owner who blends technology and team dynamics to deliver valuable products, which is a topic we're going to talk a lot about today. He writes about product development on his newsletter, The Backlog. I encourage you to sign up. The link is in the show notes. And he has a background in mechanical engineering and experience in automotive, software, and data analytics industries. He now freelances to enhance team success in product development. So, Phillip, in a recent post, and that's really the topic that we're going to explore today, in a recent post in your newsletter, The Backlog, you argue that Agile coaches should step up and learn to be product coaches. Tell us a little bit more about that, and how did you come to that conclusion?
So this article started basically because I read another article from somebody else, from Petra Wille, who I think is a fairly famous product coach. And it said Agile coaches can't be product coaches. And this it almost triggered me, I would say, because I was currently working with a team and we were I was being a product coach in that team while I was officially hired as an Agile coach. And her thesis was essentially that many Agile coaches aren't skilled enough in all facets of product development, and so they fall short in being product coaches. And I think I agreed with the article, but not with the let's say framing a little bit with the title. And so I decided to give my own view here, and I just think that it's important to remember, regardless if you're an Agile coach, a product coach, a Scrum Master, whatever the name is, the label we're using here, that we're all trying to do the same thing, right? We're trying to successfully build products, and however we call that, it's just product development. And product development, to me, I think that's well known now. There's two facets to that. There's product discovery, there's product delivery, and I think the issue that Petra Wille has, and I think she's probably right in this assessment, is that many Agile coaches get kind of pushed into the role of being a product coach, which is a, let's say, more holistic role often, as it's often seen as a more holistic role. I don't really agree that there is a big difference. And these Agile coaches get pushed into this role without having the experience of developing products holistically, and thus they focus on what's maybe easier or what they know best, which is then, let's say, Scrum practices, working on delivery, being more efficient in developing products, which of itself is helpful. But of course, there's more to product development, which is the entire discovery aspects that is then the kind of the important thing to not forget about.
So I did not read Petra's article, which is a fault on myself, but I'll go back and read it. But from what you're saying, I detect something that might be perhaps conditioning the perspective that Petra shares in her article, and others as well, Marty Kagan being another famous person who says that the coaching should not be only about delivery, it should also be about product practices. But for me, it starts not from the perspective of the Agile coach, but rather from the perspective of the organizations that we support. Because if the organization itself doesn't have a product-centric perspective, then
Absolutely.
they don't even know what to ask the Agile coaches and Scrum Masters to do. They might not even know what the whole concept of product discovery is. I mean, I remember when I started and people would say, here's the requirements document, now go and code. Right? That's how product development used to be a few decades ago. But in your personal experience, maybe you went through a moment in your career that helped you to go more from delivery focus to product centric approach. Can you share one of those experiences that helped you realize how important it was to kind of go from delivery only focus, which many of us Scrum Masters and Agile coaches have, to also embrace that role that you talk about in the newsletter, the product coach?
So I think there's a really good experience I had a few years ago. At that time, I was the product owner, so we were using Scrum. So I was the product owner of a team, a cross-functional team, really good team. And we were responsible for a B2B service, which when I started there was very small, had like one customer, I think. And we scaled it basically to a European solution. We were very successful, but looking back at it, we didn't really do discovery. Like we were, as I think Marty Kagan would call it, the feature team model or delivery team. I don't remember one of those two. We were working really closely with our salespeople, and they had a good feel for the market, and they would basically tell us, this is what we need now, and this is what we need now. And we would essentially negotiate what we do. And as I mentioned, it was really fun. We were successful. But I realized later that, we could have just been so much more successful. And there's a very specific anecdote, essentially. So I talked to customers, but not to our users, because it was like we were selling to our customers, and there was like several levers in between users. So we got very close to our salespeople. Obviously, it's in the company. Then we did talk to customers, and the feedback we got here was always that the quality was not good enough. The quality of our service. So essentially, we were in the automotive industry, so we would get a vehicle identifier, so a license plate essentially, and we would give back what the vehicle this was, and they would constantly give us the feedback that the quality is not good enough. So we spent a lot of time focused on improving the quality, which is not a bad thing at all. We did really good things there, very technically demanding things as well. And as I said, we were successful, but only after I left the company sometime later and moved to Spain, because we had a lot of customers in Spain, a lot of insurance customers in Spain, actually. I had to buy a car insurance there. And then I used our service. I mean, I knew that they were our customers, so I used the service in the background without the normal customer wouldn't probably have seen that. And I realized in that moment that there was like this B2B service was such a small part of this entire selling process of the insurance. And we never really looked at it from this user's point of view. From the user's point of view, in that sense, we focused on a very specific niche part. And if we would have just talked one time to one person buying an insurance, we would have realized the entire process is so messed up. It doesn't really matter how good our quality in this small part is, that there's so much more low-hanging fruit. Actually, we could have, like, with a lot less effort. We did like machine learning, and we did AI, all the hype. So we had to do that stuff, and we did so much very sophisticated stuff to like improve a very, very, very minuscule part of the process. And just talking to a user one time who used our product integrated in the entire process, basically, we would have realized this is good what we're doing, but there's so much more we could do with less effort that would have much, much higher impact. And just like this one thing, like just talking to your users, trying to get as close to them is so important to really understand what their problems are, instead of relying on, let's say, secondary sources who all have their biases or have their framing, let's say, of the question. And this really like drove home to me how important it is to not forget about discovery. You could be really, really successful just doing delivery, but you should never forget about discovery.
The interesting thing is, of course, we use certain words to have a specific meaning. And in the product community, discovery has been used for this idea of understanding, perceiving the world from the user's perspective, so that you understand how they see the product. What is really interesting for me is more the activity, right? And I think that's the key aspect, that even the word discovery doesn't really open up. And you've been working as a product coach for a while. How do you believe this perspective, this philosophy that we must always talk to the end user, we must always understand how the end user uses our product? How do you see that benefiting the product development life cycle?
So, I mean, I think there's two main benefits of understanding users. So first of all, of talking to users. So first of all, I think in our design decisions or decisions of product decisions, essentially, are a lot of unconscious biases and assumptions that we put in there, and just seeing a user interact with your product and watching them do stuff is so mind-blowing. So the first time you do that with the team, it's like it's always the same. It's always the same experience in my view. You watch it, and then there's like a review meeting, where the team comes together and says, "What do we learn?" And everyone's like, "Whoa, I didn't realize they did this," and we thought they did this, but they didn't. And there's so many unconscious decisions in the process, and just like watching people use your product is extremely enlightening to see what they actually what their needs actually are. And secondly, it's incredibly motivating, I feel, if you as a team watch users interact with your product and see how it might solve a problem for them. It's just to me, it's incredibly motivating for the entire team to and also coming together as a team. It's a really powerful tool, I think.
So coming back to why we are talking about this product discovery and observing users and so on is, of course, because we are talking about your main article or your article in the backlog, where you argue that we should become, meaning Agile coaches, Scrum Masters should become also product coaches. But of course, as you said, and as many others have said, we realize that's not the case right now, that many Agile coaches, many Scrum Masters are so focused on delivery that they forget the product part. And again, I don't like the word discovery. I think it is too reductionist, but let's call it discovery for a moment. I think we are talking a lot more than just discovery, but let's talk about discovery for a moment. What do you think has prevented Agile coaches, Scrum Masters from realizing the role they have to play on that aspect of product development, the discovery, and become therefore product coaches?
So first of all, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on discovery, but maybe we could talk about that in a second. So I think oftentimes it's, on the one hand, probably somewhat missing experience, So I'm working with with a Scrum Master right now. And basically her boss told her, we need a Scrum Master. Why don't you take this training and then you can do it? And of course she has no product. It's not her fault, of course. She just has never done it before, but there's just missing experience, like she's never built a product with a team. She's never really worked closely with a development team. So one is probably many Agile coaches go in there and don't have that much experience. So that's one, and all you can do here is read stuff and gain that experience, try to build products. And the second thing is often actually the organization, I think. So there's sometimes outside of the team forces that basically make it difficult to holistically think about product development. Instead, oftentimes it's the senior leaders that say that think they understand the business better than maybe the team does, or maybe the Agile coach does, or maybe the product owner, whatever you want to call it, does. And essentially they say, you know what, there's no need. I mean, they don't specifically say this, but implicitly it's assumed that it's not necessary to do this. Understanding users, figuring out what actually want to do, but there's a clear direction. Just, you know what, we have this roadmap, we need feature A, B, C, D, just build it. And that leads these newly created Agile coaches, let's say, who might not have that much experience, to focus on delivery, because it's kind of the organization drives them to that. So it's I think those are probably two inexperience often, and the organizational environment probably oftentimes makes it hard for agile coaches to really holistically focus on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think your perspective kind of overlaps very much also with my experience. For me, one of the key things that I try to focus on is that product development, you called it holistic product development, is something that starts much earlier before any team even gets involved, like a sales conversation or a visionary from a CTO or a technical lead or whatever that might be. And of course, in order to think about product holistically, as you described, we need some skills, some concepts, some practices. So what, in your experience, what might be some of those skills, concepts, or practices that Agile coaches and Scrum Masters might be missing at the moment that would allow them to embrace that product coach role?
So I think there's a few things. I mean, you can always say like read the famous people that write about stuff. But I think there's a few like very more or less easy things you can do, even if you're in an organization that doesn't really allow for this holistic view, that can help already. So I think the number one thing to me is try to get as close to your users as you possibly can. So if possible, speak to them directly. If not, so in our case, as I mentioned before, in this B2B service, we were so at least like talk to the customers or get one level closer, but just get as close to the users as possible, and ideally speak to them regularly. So I really like Teresa Torres' continuous discovery framework. So there's a lot in there, but I think her most to me, at least, the most impactful advice she gave in there is trying to give weekly touch points with users, and it doesn't have to be like a fancy, usability test or anything like that, but just watching them interact for half an hour a week or so. Watching a user interact with your product is in my view might be the most impactful thing you can do, and you can start easy. You can do in the beginning, do a monthly interview, and later do it weekly. So this actually, maybe I can also tell a short story here, because that basically that was the number one thing we introduced with the team I worked with last year. I was hired as a Scrum Master there, and in the beginning we did the regular Scrum. I helped them implement or improve the Scrum framework, and then at some point we realized that we really didn't know what our users actually thought. And the lucky thing here was we had internal users. So we are building a software tool for the service agents of this company. And there's no easier thing to recruit users if your users are internal. So so that was very, very easy for us to do. And I realize it might not be that easy for everybody, but it was so impactful. As I mentioned before, the first interview we had, everybody came out minds blown, basically like, oh, I thought they did it like this way, but they're now doing it a different way. And this is, we introduced this, and we've been doing it for almost 3/4 of a year now, almost every week, just talking to one user. Now we're really starting to actually run experiments. So just going from simply watching to experiments, so just taking it one step further. But simply talking to them, I think, is the most impactful one thing you can do. Getting as close to them as possible and talking to users if you can do that. And very important here, because people often forget it. There's should always be engineers present, because that's I think we often do usability tests, and where maybe there's a UX designer, and then there's a product manager, and maybe a product owner or so. But having the actual team that is building the product watch users is so important, that they do this every once in a while. I mean, some people simply don't want to. That's also fine. But at least one engineer should be present, and that is so powerful. Also, it just opens the mind to different options that the product in which it can grow into. So this, I think, is probably the number one thing you can do. And then let's say more generally, I think a very, very powerful thing to do is simply aiming to deploy changes as soon as possible, because that automatically, I mean, it's a little bit of a different topic now, right? A little bit more technical, but if you're building small increments and if you're deploying often, you automatically solve so many issues that other teams have in your team. You get quick feedback loops. You can you become better at deploying. You can spot errors quicker. You can, and then if you have these quick feedback loops, if you're able to quickly deploy small changes, you can really quickly make the jump to like actual testing, like doing Wizard of Oz smoke screen test or so on. So on just testing features, because you're used to these small changes that you deploy to your product, and then you can combine the interviews with the small changes and simply. I think that's a very, very powerful.
So one thing that I like in your suggestion is that the moment we get interaction with users, it's impossible for us not to find out something new about the product. And it really is a great feedback cycle among the other feedback cycles that we might want to build into the teams that we work with. I think that having that first-hand feedback from real users of our product is definitely going to create a very valuable and also motivating, as you said, feedback cycle. Now, there's a reason why we have these feedback cycles. And in your article, you also referred to what Marty Kagan calls the principle for successful teams, or the principles for successful teams. They are address risks as early as possible, build products collaboratively, focus on problems instead of features. In your experience, how are Agile coaches out there missing the deeper insights from these principles? Because at least as I read them, on the surface, as I read the words, they all sound very much in line with the Agile Manifesto. But what might we still be missing from these three principles that would allow us to be more product coaches than we are currently?
So I think as you said, on the surface, they look or sound as though they could be almost part of the Agile Manifesto. They perfectly fit, or more or less fit together with it. But I think the issue is here in the details. So in the actual implementation, address risks as early as possible. What does that mean? I mean, that makes a lot of sense. The later you do changes, the more costly they become. So you want to make sure you address all risks early, so you do the changes early on. But what does that actually mean? Well, that means you have to run experiments. You have to test different things. And I think if I remember correctly, Marty Kagan, I think there's 4 types of risks: viability, feasibility, value, and usability, I think. And let's just talk about usability. If you wanted to de-risk usability, you have to do some sort of test to test the usability, So you have to run some sort of usability test early, and doing that effectively is a skill, right? You need to know how to set up these tests, how to recruit people. So I think this is where the difficulty lies. Same goes for the building products collaboratively. Yeah, everybody says, cross-functional, that's great, and so on. But how do you actually manage a team when you have a UX designer who's designing stuff, and then you have developers who are implementing it? Like, it's really easy to fall back into this semi-waterfall approach, where then the designer just designs the entire time, and then the developers implement the design. So this is something we actually struggled a bit with, and we kind of tried to get real collaboration by having more frequent touch points, where it didn't matter if the designs were actually finished. We just got engineers and designers together and had them discuss what is going on. So the designers presented, the engineers could already bring in their technical expertise and say this might be difficult technically to implement, and those kind of discussions. But it always sounds easy to say build cross-functionally, collaboratively, but the details of how to do this in the day-to-day are not so simple. And I think there's also not necessarily a silver bullet here, and it's just team dependent circumstance dependent, to get there. And the last one, focus on problems instead of features. So this is all about the empowerment of the team, I think. Going from what I had earlier, where I said we were this feature team where the leadership would tell us what to build essentially, and to change this mindset, to go from there to focus on, okay, these are the user problems we're trying to address. I mean, that's hard work. Convincing your leaders that they don't know best. So this is you can't expect that to happen overnight. You really need to like negotiate, discuss, convince them, because it's a culture change. So that is not so easy. So I think that's where the difficulty lie with all three, is the actual, like, the dirty, getting your hands dirty here. It always sounds easy, but it's doing it itself is then the difficult part, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you, especially the last one. I think there's a lot of organizations that are already designed from the top down, usually, to only talk or discuss solutions. And of course, the moment you start discussing solutions, you forgot about why they are important and who it serves and what is that user's goal, which is something that we don't very often talk about. And unfortunately, many Scrum Masters and Agile coaches also don't pay attention to that part of the user story, right? Because the user story, let's call it traditional template, has a goal part, but very often it is totally ignored, and we just leave the solution there instead. Now, of course, we are talking about Agile coaching and Scrum Master roles in the perspective of learning to become product coaches. So learning to address those risks early, to build products collaboratively outside the team as well as inside the team, and focusing on problems instead of features. But how do you see the role of Agile coaches evolving? Because I think that now we have, maybe from the perspective of being an Agile coach and Scrum Master, I think we have to reassess, like, where do we want to put our efforts? Where do we want to put our focus? What do we want to learn, right? So how do you see the role of Agile coaches evolving, and what challenges do you think they need to overcome to become also effective product coaches?
I think the evolution is going exactly in the direction we just discussed. I think it's exactly in this, like, opening the focus from simply improving, delivering a product, to being a more holistic product development support, let's say, for a team. And again, there's a lot of value in simply improving the delivery, right? But I think it's just the evolution is natural, that we go a step further and say, okay, many Agile coaches have good knowledge on Scrum, on different frameworks, and we have to, like, open our mind a bit and say, what else is there in product development that we can and should improve? And this is, again, I mean, it's a label, right? Agile coach. Product coaching is not so well known, I would say, or product development coach, or whatever you want to call it. But I think in the end, it's about understanding the team is here, and the goal of the team is to get up here to deliver something successfully that our users love. But it also works inside the confines of a company. I think that might also be from Marty Kagan, not sure here. And this, whatever it takes to get from point A to point B, I think that's what the Agile coaches should be focusing on in the long run. And whether you call that discovery or something else doesn't really matter. But in my view, it's just about helping with product development.
I really like that idea. Just focus on getting from point A to point B, and whatever needs to happen, we need to be ready to help the team. We were talking about some examples already in this episode, like customer interviews, usability tests, just observing users. Those are all practices that can help us to go from point A to point B, i.e. from an idea to a product that actually has an impact on the market. And for me, that also points to something in the future that we're not talking about yet, and neither did Petra, I guess, in her article, from what I understand, which is this concept that being a product coach has to start way before there is even an idea of what are the problems we want to solve. And this is where I like very much the practice of using a lean canvas that Ash Maurya talks about, and we have an episode with him here on the podcast. The lean canvas idea, which is to first start from this holistic perspective of where does the product even fit, right? Like, because even the idea that there is a product is already solution space. We haven't yet understood, like, how does this amplify our business model, because we're going to sell it? And how does this help the customer and then ultimately the user achieve their goals? So this points to, I think, an evolution that needs to go far beyond just what Teresa Torres calls continuous discovery. I think we need to go beyond that as well. But that's my perspective. I want to ask you, though, Philip, if you look at what you currently are experiencing and what you've been thinking about, and if we turn all of those practices, some of which you have already discussed here today, if we turn all of those practices all the way to 11, how does product development look like when we take these things that you talked about today seriously and really push the practices to their logical conclusion?
So how would it look in the future if like everything was at 11, you mean? Everything would be perfect, no? We would have.
But what would it look like? Like, what would that look like?
So I think what it would look like is if I take, let's say, I'm imagining now the team I'm currently working with. So it's you have 3 developers and a UX designer, and I think what it would look like is basically on demand. You have obviously you have a very good team spirit and very good collaboration and so on. And the biggest change to today would be that we would simply, when we are not sure about anything, like when we're discussing designs, let's say, or solutions, we would just stop the discussion, because we would say, okay, let's quickly run this test, because right now we're not able to do that still, but we would have the infrastructure in place to say, okay, let's quickly build something that we can just push to our users and see how they react, and maybe quantitatively or qualitative, doesn't really matter. But I think this is would be the biggest change for us right now, would be that, like, every day, whenever we have a disagreement about something, or whenever we're not 100% sure, we would just run a quick test. And I think there's teams that already do this, but I think they're rare. I think for us, this would be like the evolution with the team that I'm currently working on, to just be able to quickly, whenever we have a disagreement, whenever we're not sure, create something small and then push it out and see how the users react to that.
So I would call that continuous experimentation. Yeah. What you just described, I really like it, and I argue for it. I have an episode from a special series I did this Christmas, exactly talking about how do we get there. And I want to already give you an invitation. When you get there, do come back on the podcast and share your experience. Because I think that what you said has quite a lot of depth that is not immediately clear if we just consider the delivery perspective and then the product discovery perspective. I think you're talking about something that merges these two, and that's what I think about product development. I don't think you can separate product thinking from delivery thinking. I think you need to merge those, and the example you just gave, whenever we don't know or we are unsure, we just run an experiment. And if we think about product delivery as a continuous series of experiments, learning, and then, of course, adapting to it, then we are doing discovery and delivery at the same time without the need to even discuss that we are doing one or the other. And I think that's what is missing when we try to separate discovery from delivery, right? And that's a thought that I would like to also explore further, and I will explore further in my work. But I really like that idea that you said, that whenever we are not sure, we just run an experiment.
So is that the reason why you don't like the term discovery? Because it's the separation between the two?
I think discovery means or implies that there is something out there that is, quote unquote, the right answer. And that's another example of this teleological thinking, right? This is the same thinking that gave us the requirement specs, right? It's this idea that you can also see in product people, that you need to have the product design whether it is information architecture design or UI design, whatever. You need to have the design before the developers come in. And that is already talking to the whole waterfall mindset we used to have in the 90s, right? Like something needs to be done before the other. And I think that the experimentation process and thinking that you just talked about brings those together. And that's what Agile is all about, right? And I really like that, because we were talking about it in the context of this turning Agile all the way to 11. And I think experimentation is exactly there, like bringing all of this together in a seamless way that is focusing on what actually matters. And sometimes, of course, we're more on delivery, other times we're more on discovery. I don't like the word discovery because I don't think there's anything out there that you're supposed to discover. I use the word search, because what you're doing is literally searching for something, but you can find, that there are 100 different options out there that could work. We only need to find one. It's not discovery, in which, that points us to 500 years ago when you would discover a continent. And there's no continent out there in the problem space. There's just many opportunities, and you need to search for one and stick to it.
Understood. Yeah, I think your idea of this, making it come together and continuously having one thing that is both discovery and delivery at the same time. I think that's probably the very, very good summary of how it should be in the future.
Yeah, and I really like that idea that you share the idea that when we're not sure, just run an experiment. Philip, we're getting close to the end, but before we go though, do tell us, where can we find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active there, Phillip Starke. You can also, obviously, as you mentioned before, sign up to my newsletter or look at my website. The first time I read out the name of my website, I realized I should have chosen a different name, but it's my last name and first name, so Starke Philip, so STARKE and then PHILLIP.com. Those are the two spaces where you can find out more about me and follow me.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely put the link to all of those in the show notes so that people can easily find you. And why not ask a few follow-up questions?
Absolutely.
Philip, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Hi there, Agile friends. Thank you for sticking around and listening to the details of the Product Owner Summit, this year's global summit dedicated to a critical Scrum role, the Product Owner role, of course. We'll have some amazing keynotes and 4 tracks filled with first-hand stories and experiences for product owners to learn more about that critical Scrum role. The summit will take place between April 23rd and 25th, so book your calendars. There will be loads of sessions for you to attend. One of the keynotes will be Dave West, the product owner and CEO at Scrum.org, one of the largest Scrum organizations in the world. If you want to know more, check out the details at bit.ly/product owner 2024. That's all one word, all lowercase, bit.ly/product owner 2024. We will also have 4 tracks. The 4 tracks will cover cross-functional product ownership. That's track 1. As Pixar's Ratatouille said, not every idea can be a great idea, but a great idea can come from anywhere. And this quote emphasizes the importance of a product owner being open to all ideas, regardless of the source, and also challenges us to focus on getting good ideas from everywhere and involving the whole team in the product owner role and responsibilities. The second track is Designing Products for Growth, where we explore how to craft products ready for scalable growth, merging practical strategies with innovation. The idea here is to learn to design products for growth, whether it is sales or customer acquisition. The third track is Know Your Users, user-centric approaches for Agile development. In this track, we learn to master user-centric techniques in Agile development, to deeply understand customer needs and transform insights into meaningful UX designs that focus on engagement and satisfaction. This is a track ideal for innovation-focused Agile teams. And the fourth track, one of the most exciting tracks in my opinion, is product development with AI, ideas for product owners. Not only do we discuss about using AI in the products, but also AI for product owners to learn to make a bigger impact with the help of the AI tools that we already have. The Product Owner Summit will also present to you great opportunities to network with your peers. So get your ticket and join our Slack. You can get the ticket and join the Slack at bit.ly/Product Owner 2024. As always, we have free tickets and also the paid tickets that help to support this podcast. So check them out at bit.ly/Product Owner 2024. That's all lowercase, all one word, Product Owner 2024. I'll see you in the summit floor.